Let me introduce the next speaker. She is my English teacher, and unfortunately, I was preparing the project and working so hard on the project, Great University, which I introduced to you today, that I had to skip my CAE preparation classes. She is a general English and exam preparation teacher at Great Education Center. And she's also SLP and CLS trainer, a CELTA qualified and Delta qualified professional. And this is Oksana Nazarchuk. Oksana, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Hello,
great,
everybody.
Nice to see you again. Unfortunately, not as a student, but as a colleague again today. So glad to see you today. Oksana is going to talk about the question that teachers, like the most frequently asked question by the teachers to students, right? Do you understand, right? And
hopefully not.
Yeah, and she knows different ways to avoid these questions, and actually she is going to share this in her session right now. Oksana, I will make you the co-host so that you could share your presentation, and I'm giving the floor to Oksana Nazarchuk and her session on how to check learners' understanding of new grammar structures. Okay, let us check if everything works with you.
Let me check. Can you see my presentation?
Oh, yes, we can.
Okay.
All right, good. Thank you very much.
Let me start it. Oh. Oh, it's really slow. That's okay. So, as Yulia has mentioned, today we're going to talk about avoiding this common question. Do you understand? Yeah, we overuse it sometimes, and I did so myself. So let's look at ways of, first, let's discuss why we should avoid it. And secondly, look at ways of doing so. So I will begin with my experience. So when I was just doing my CELTA course, I had an experience that made me reconsider teaching grammar and a special explanation of meaning. So my CELTA course was quite interesting because I was doing it part-time. So I had my other groups in addition to my CELTA groups, and I experimented on them and tried new techniques. And my trainers told me about CCQs and clarification of meaning, but I kept doing it my own old-fashioned way. Until one day when I was teaching Be Going To. And it wasn't the first time I taught it, so I knew that this is a tricky structure because my students often forgot about be and they often forgot about to. So I explained what it means, and I used color coding to highlight be, to highlight to, so everything was fine. I asked my students, do you understand? So they seemed to understand. Everything was going well. We did some grammar exercises, controlled practice, semi-controlled practice. So we built sentences. We started asking questions. And then one student asks me, in Ukrainian actually, so he says, but how do we use it? And I'm like, okay, again. And I start explaining again where we put be and all that stuff. And then the student says, I understand how to make sentences, but what does it mean? And I was like, okay, Oksana, you failed. But this was actually a good aha moment. At that time, I realized why we have to ask all those checking questions, why we have to clarify the meaning the way we are taught during CELTA. So actually, that wasn't a total failure. That helped me to learn a valuable lesson, which I want to share with you today. Now, if you're like me, maybe you were more fortunate, but if you're like me, this is probably your school or university experience with grammar explanation. So the way it happened, in my childhood, the teacher would say, "Okay, class, today we are studying be going to." The teacher would write it at the top of the board, then showed. Oh, okay, hold on a minute. So the teacher would write the name of the structure, then write explain in detail and write the structure of it, so how to make positive sentences, negative sentences, and then at the end there would be this sentence, how to use it. There will be the rule. But by the end of all that, I would switch off. I would think about something else. I would never pay attention to that. And somehow I learned this way of teaching. And to be honest, at the start of my career, that was the way I taught grammar, unfortunately. However, that experience, plus my CELTA course, taught me that no, we do it differently. And we always begin with meaning first. That my CELTA course taught me that there are three aspects of teaching grammar, not only the form, not only the structure, how we put words in the correct order in sentences, which endings to use, but we start with meaning. We explain to our students what the structure means, how to use it, when to use it. Then only after that, we focus on the form. And only then only after that, we even practice pronunciation. But why do we start with meaning first? So it's not just for learners to understand what the structure means. Yeah, it's logical, but it's motivating for our learners. So when they know what it means and when we use it, clearly they will be motivated to apply their knowledge in speech or in any situations where they need English. So it motivates them to keep using the structure. And because it ensures further use, it also ensures students' improvement. And moreover, discipline. If you teach teenagers or kids, you probably know that if they don't understand something, they start misbehaving. They misbehave so much. So it also helps with discipline. So clarification of meaning first, it's not just the formula. There are reasons why we do that. And the main reason is to encourage our students to use the structure. Now, how do we start clarifying the meaning? So yeah, the teacher can come to class and say, good morning, we're going to study be going to today. So we use it to talk about the future and about our future plans. Yeah, we can do it. But again, think of people who are tired after work or teenagers who have so many classes and so many other interests. Will they listen to you? Probably not. That's why we begin by establishing the context in which your learners will encounter the structure first. So some common context that can be used are a reading text or a listening text. And if you think about any modern English books, mostly they use this way of establishing the context. So they give you a reading text or a listening text. You have to do some tasks, do reading or listening for gist, for detail. You have to analyze discuss the text, the questions about it, and only after that you will focus on grammar. This is done for a reason, because students don't even notice how they come across the structure, and later when you start clarifying it, it becomes easier for them to understand the meaning. But it can also be an anecdote or a personal story told by the teacher. For example, let's say you're going to teach past simple, and you begin the lesson by telling your students about your last weekend, something extraordinary that happened last weekend, and tell them the story. They are interested in the story. They don't pay attention to the tenses, but you introduce these to your students at the same time. Or it can be a lead-in discussion. Let's say you are on the verge of the summer break, and you can ask your learners, so what do you want to do this summer? And you ask them about their plans. What are your plans? And they share your plans with you, and you note them down on the board using the structure, but not without focusing on it yet. Or it can be a picture and its description. For example, it works really well for present continuous, where you show the picture and you describe what's going on there. It works well for comparatives and superlatives, because you can visually show the differences. For example, Tom is taller than Bob. So Tom is 1 meter 80 centimeters, but Bob is just 1 meter 60 centimeters. So Tom is taller than Bob. You show the pictures and it's clear. So it's also the context. So there are different ways you can establish the context and help learners notice the structure. But before you, when you choose the context for your lesson, you also need to evaluate how good it is. So in order, for example, to choose a good reading text, it's necessary to make sure that the structure is used in this text a lot. So there is a lot of repetition of the structure, and your learners can see it, can notice it later on, and you will use these sentences for your explanation. But it's also important to make sure that the structure is used naturally, in such a way that doesn't draw too much attention. So students will understand from the context what it means, and the structure itself won't be the main focus for them. The story, the information in this text will be more important. And clearly, the meaning of the structure should be made obvious through this context. If all these aspects are present in the text, for example, that you want to use, or in the story that you're going to tell, then the context that will be quite helpful and will enhance your teaching. Now, so how do we work with this context? So we read the text, we made sure that the text that we want to use, it uses a target language. Often that the meaning can be made is obvious, so students can understand the meaning. And you also made sure that it's natural use of the structure. So what do you do next? You focus on example sentences. One common mistake that I made in the past, and I noticed it while observing other teachers' lessons in my teacher training practice, is using example sentences that are disconnected from the context. So you have read this beautiful this nice text that contains the grammar. Why not use the sentences from the text? Why develop other sentences? So take the sentences from the text. Let's take just one sentence. For example, in this case, I chose this marker sentence from the text. So we read a text about, we discussed my plans for the next year. So I chose this sentence and I write on the board, I'm going to study Spanish at university. I underline this, I'm going to study, but I'm not focusing on the form yet. And after that, I have two choices. I can tell my students, so look, I'm going to. This structure is used to talk about future plans. It's possible, but I can engage my students more by asking them questions, so I can elicit the rule from them. Why is it better? Because they will be more focused throughout the explanation. They won't start thinking about something else. They will start analyzing the language at once while looking at the structure and while trying to answer my questions. And even if their answers are wrong, still they will learn something about the structure. So at least they will learn that, no, it's not about the past, if, for example, they believe it's about the past. So that's why I start nominating them. I start asking questions. I elicit the rules from them. How do I do that? By asking just some simple questions. For example, about this question, about this sentence. I'm going to study Spanish at university. So the first question will be, is it about my past, my present, or my future? So future. Okay, good. Then I can ask them, is it my plan? Yes, it's a plan. Do you think I made this plan now while speaking to you or before? Okay, before. Good. So in this case, I elicited it from them. But what's important, I do not nominate. Why? Because this is the first time they encounter the structure. And I'm talking here about elementary students who see the structure for the first time. So this is the first time they encounter it. Yes, I made sure that the meaning will be clear from context by choosing a good text, but I can't guarantee that all of them understood the meaning clearly. That's why at this level, at this stage, I just elicit, and it's okay if stronger students answer the questions. It's fine. They help everybody understand. So I ask, is it about present, past, or future? And they say future. I say, good, yes, future. I can even note it down on the board. Then I ask them, is it my plan? Yes, yeah, good, it's a plan, yes. So I elicit from them, and it's fine if stronger learners say it. But what's important, at the end of this eliciting session, I need to summarize the rule. Students still need to hear the rule from the teacher. They helped me reconstruct this rule by answering the questions. They analyzed the language. Now I praise them for their good work, and I say, good job, you helped me. Now let's summarize it. So we're going to talk about future plans, which we made now? No, which we made before. Good. And I put it on the board or just make notes on the board, etc. Do you think that's enough? We can start practicing the structure in using grammar exercises next? No, not yet. Actually, this was my mistake. That's what I did with this grammar structure. When I had the student asking me, so what does it mean? My explanation wasn't really good, but it still was quite good. However, I didn't make sure that everybody understood it. Most students did understand. So I had some stronger students, they did understand it. But this particular student that was puzzled, no, he didn't. He needed more help. And I didn't check whether he understood it or not. So our next step after clarification is checking understanding. And how do we do it? We take more marker sentences from the same text. We keep using the same context. That's why I said we need to have several uses of the structure. We have to see the structure being repeated in the text. So we take more marker sentences. For example, here I say, I'm going to watch a lot of good films. And I keep asking the same questions. I don't need to change the questions even. But this time when I ask these questions, I start nominating. So when we were eliciting, there was no nomination because it was important for me to just elicit it from anybody in the group. However, when I check understanding, I need to make sure that everybody, including the weaker students, understands the structure clearly and correctly. So that's why here we nominate. But we need to keep in mind that weaker learners, they might need more time to think. And in order not to have a situation when a stronger learner answers quickly before they are ready to give the answer. So what we do, so I say, okay, look at this sentence. I'm going to watch a lot of good films. Now, please be quiet. Don't say anything. Be quiet. And I can even look at these stronger students. And I say, now, is this sentence about present, past, or future? Be quiet. Present, past, or future? And then I nominate one of the students. And I repeated, depending on how difficult the structure is, I repeated several times with several students, focusing on weaker students, definitely, but I don't want to draw too much attention to them. I don't want to make it seem like they are the weakest, so I only ask them. No, I have to ask everybody, but making sure that the weaker students clearly understand the structure. So I will ask them more. So in this case, we check understanding, and we can repeat the cycle with one more or two more sentences. So until I'm sure that my learners understood it clearly. So here you can see how we use questions when clarifying meaning for two different reasons. So we can use them to actually elicit the meaning from them before summarizing it. And for that purpose, we don't nominate. And we can use these questions to check understanding, to make sure that students actually understood the meaning clearly. And here we do nominate, and we make sure to give some time to think, some thinking time. Now, how do we ask these questions? How do we prepare them? How do we make them? It might seem quite easy. You just ask a question and that's it. No, there are lots of problems there. So look at this situation. Here the teacher made mistakes when preparing their checking questions. So the marker sentence was, Tom is going to study chemistry at university. The teacher asks, has Tom studied chemistry before? Does Tom like chemistry? What's wrong with those questions? Now I want you to reply. So please write in the chat box what you think is wrong here. Good, okay. Yes, very good.
Can I tell?
Yeah.
It will be quicker than writing. There is no context. We can't understand from the text. We don't know exactly
Okay, but
the
this
main
sentence
purpose
was
of
taken.
his learning.
This sentence was taken from context. So we imagine that there was a reading text. The sentence was taken from context.
But we don't know exactly what was before.
Yeah, we
And his
sorry.
preferences. And his preferences, nothing.
Okay, just a second. I
Mm-hmm.
stood. Okay. Here the main problem is that the fact that whether Tom studied chemistry before or not, doesn't help us understand the structure. The structure is be going to. The fact that he studied it before doesn't change the structure. So these two sentences, they are not related to the structure. The meaning of the structure is a future plan which was made before speaking. Whether he likes it, whether he has studied it, it makes no difference. So when we prepare these checking questions, we need to make sure that we address the key meaning of the structure. We can't just ask anything. We have to address the meaning of the structure. In one of my favorite books on checking questions, concept checking questions and timelines, if I'm not mistaken, I will include it in recommendations. It is recommended, so they give a recommendation how we can prepare these checking questions. So we break the meaning of the structure into pieces. For example, be going to means it's a future plan which was made earlier, not at the moment of speaking. So future plan, which was made earlier.
And
so that's why
intentions, of course.
Intention.
Yes.
Future plan or intention, yes. So that's why we ask the questions this way. Intention might be a more difficult word for A2 students. That's why we can use the word plan instead of intention. But they mean approximately, the meaning is quite similar. So that's why we ask these questions. Is it about future, present, or past? So future. Then, is it my plan? Yes, it's a plan. Or is it his plan? Yes, it's a plan. And did we decide now or earlier? So we broke the meaning into three components and we asked questions about these three components. Now we address the key meaning of the structure. These questions here, they don't address the key meaning of the structure. When you ask your student these questions, they will not help you see whether they understood the structure or not. They don't help you in any way. So rule number one, when preparing these questions, focus on its key meaning, the key meaning of the structure. Then let's look at another problem. And again, we read the text. This sentence came from the text, so students are familiar with the context. Look at these questions. What is not quite right there? Can you please write in the chat box? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Yes, exactly. So a lot of correct answers. Well done. So these questions, they include the target structure. So going to. We can't use the target structure in the question because if the students did not understand what the structure means, so the question itself is not meaningful for them. So they will just say yes, no. It will be just a guess. So rule number two, we should never use target structures in these checking questions. With them, the questions again don't help you understand whether don't help you clarify whether their understanding is correct or not. And then let's look at another common mistake. This question again is not appropriate. Why? Who can help me? Please write in the chat box. Yeah, exactly. So you're right. The question, the language in the question is too complicated. So be going to is first introduced at elementary level, or sometimes even at A1 level. It depends on the course. So, and then you ask your students, was the intention previously decided upon by the interlocutor? You will lose your students there. So they will not be able to answer the question. They will say yes or no, having no idea what you're asking them. So we have to make sure that we use very simple language in our questions. So in these questions, for eliciting to check understanding, the level of language should be at least one level below their actual level. So if it's possible, clearly. So use very simple language here, as simple as you can, because your main aim is to help your learners understand what the structure means. When you use very simple language, it will be easier for them to understand what you're asking them. So let's summarize this. So when we ask any checking questions, we make sure to we need to make sure that we focus only on the key meaning of the structure. We don't ask about something that's disconnected from this meaning. Then we never include target language in the question. So if we ask about going to, then there shouldn't be going to in the question. And we use very simple language, as simple as possible. Okay. Now let's see some more examples. Some of these examples are good ones, some of these are not. So you have here this sentence. Tom has been to Italy. And again, we imagine that our students have read the text or have listened to a text, so they know who Tom is, they know about his journeys around the world. So now it's only a marker sentence from this text. Tom has been to Italy. And we can see three questions here. Do you think they are good ones or not? Put plus or minus in the chat box, please. Exactly, right? Yes, I can see lots of minuses. Yes, none of them are good. So, does Tom like traveling? This question is not connected to the meaning of present perfect. Has Tom been to Italy? We use the target language here. Has the time of the sad journey been made clear? The language is too complicated. However, if we look here, what about these questions? Good or not? Yeah, exactly. All of them are good questions because what we did, we broke the meaning of the structure into elements. So present perfect is used to talk about something that has happened. So it happened at some point in the past. We don't mention when it happened. And in this case, when we talk about has been, Tom is not in Italy anymore. So he went there, he came back. So it's a finished action. So something that happened in the past, but we don't specify when. So these questions are good ones. Now let's have a look at one more. Tom used to play the guitar at university. It's a pity he has no time now. So looking at these questions, do you see any good ones here? Please write in the chat box, 1, 2, or 3. Okay, so number 1 is good. You're right, because it focuses on the meaning. So Tom does not play the guitar now. So used to, he does not do it now. Number 2 is not good because, again, the target structure is being used here. So did he used to? We can't use the target structure in the question. Number 3, again, overcomplicated. Used to, typically introduced at pre-intermediate, sometimes even at elementary. Too complicated for this level. But if we look at these questions, they are much better. So again, we broke the meaning into components. Happened in the past repeatedly, doesn't happen now. So we ask, does Tom play the guitar now? No. Did he play the guitar in the past? Yes. And did Tom play the guitar once or many times? Many times. Now, these questions actually address the meaning of the structure. And they are not overcomplicated, and the target structure is not used there. When planning your, when asking instruction checking questions, when asking these checking questions, at first it might be quite tricky. So if you're not used to asking them, it's a good idea to write them down before your lesson when planning the lesson. With time, it will get easier. So most times you will be able to come up with those questions on the spot. For some trickier structures, you might need to plan them beforehand anyway. But at first, that you will need some planning to use them effectively. There are 2 good resources that I like using and I can recommend for this topic. So these are 2 great books. So the first one, Concept Questions and Timelines, and the second one, Teaching English Grammar. However, I wouldn't recommend just copying these these checking questions from the books without adapting them in any way, because even though the structure means the same, no matter which culture you're from, which country you're from, still our native language can influence our understanding of English structures. So for different cultures, we might want to focus on different aspects of the structure more. And that's why it's a good idea to think carefully which aspects of the structure you will want to pay more attention to with your students. For some languages, a certain topic will be quite clear and easy to understand. For others, no, so you will maybe have to ask more questions. So it depends a lot on your context as well. Okay. I hear some noise, but I can't see who it is coming from. Can I ask everybody to keep your microphones off? Okay, thank you. So, actually, we're almost done. I'm really fast somehow. Okay, so to summarize, and again, summarizing the rule, to summarize what we discussed, when we clarify a new grammar topic, and it's not only about grammar, for vocabulary it works the same way, but when today we talk about grammar. So when we clarify a new grammar topic, we will start with the context, as I mentioned, it can be a reading text, it can be a story, some discussion with your students. So it can be different, something different every time. Then we elicit from our students what the rule is by asking them questions. But at this stage, we do not nominate them. So we just let anybody in the group answer the questions. We can ask several students to answer these questions. And then we summarize the rule. Afterwards, there is one last really important stage, which is checking understanding, where we also ask the same questions, but we nominate our learners to make sure that everybody understood the topic. And about this stage, checking understanding, one important note. Sometimes it can happen that you start checking understanding and your students give you wrong answers. And it's not a disaster. It's not the end of the world. So that's okay. They keep answering your questions incorrectly. Don't try to correct them at once. Calm down, listen to them, ask more questions, ask more students. See whether it's just one student who didn't understand it, or maybe the whole group didn't understand it. So this is a good situation for you because it shows what your learners or what your students actually understood from your explanation. And based on what you discover, then you can make the decision to either teach the structure again to the whole class, or maybe work with this one student who has problems. So it can happen. Don't think that if you ask perfect questions that everybody will understand at once, you won't have any problems later on. It can happen that some students will have problems. This is why you check understanding before practicing the structure. So to decide either whether to teach it again to the whole class in a different way, or maybe you will just have to work with this individual student. So overall, that's it for me. I don't know how I managed to finish so quickly. Maybe you have some questions about the topic at the moment.
Some remarks. We have no time to discuss a lot of things. We should give train and okay, train and have the results. I think that's all.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I see the question. So how do we deal with structures which have multiple meanings and such as tenses? So we introduce these different meanings one at a time. Especially at lower levels. We never introduce all of them at once. So one at a time. Later on, when we work with higher levels, then we can summarize, so we can ask separate checking questions for one meaning and separate checking questions for another meaning, but your students have been introduced to them earlier, so then you just quickly ask several questions to make sure that their understanding of both meanings is correct. So then you shorten the questioning process, but ask about several meanings. But at lower levels, you just focus on one meaning at a time. You never focus on all meanings together. And somebody asked about CCQs for beginners, yes, they do work for beginners. So they work for all levels and even for beginners. It's just that for beginners, you have to be really, really careful with how you ask the question, which words you use. You will use lots of gestures there as well. So sometimes you might have to resort to translation, but again, it will depend on the situation. Usually it's possible to avoid translation and just ask really clear questions, even when talking with beginners. Okay, and with young learners, definitely please work with young learners too. Okay. And I think time markers in examples. Yes, please do use time markers in examples. They are really necessary as well. Yes. Okay, thank you. I will give floor to our colleague, to my colleague Olena. And if you have any other questions, please write them in the chat box. And at the end, I believe we will have some time for more discussion. So I will be happy to answer them. Thank you for your attention, everybody.